Mr. Buckler, any follow-up?
Just briefly, you didn't write a report, though, of how you did this or what videos you included. You just turned that over to you turned the video over to Detective Long without a report, is that right?
I created the timeline, which has the casino, the camera number, the time, and just a brief synopsis of what happened. I provided that to Detective Long to include into his investigative report.
Also, the reason that you were able to take out some parts that you felt weren't relevant, I think is the word you used, and correct me if I'm wrong, was because you had focused upon the activity of Mr. Harris, Mr. Cherry, Mr. Walters. Is that correct?
That's correct.
No further questions.
Let me remind the jurors at this point in time that they were advised of their ability to ask questions of witnesses. They were advised that they could use their notepads and pens if they had any questions and write them out, including the juror number. The court would review them and determine whether they should be asked and what those parameters were. Can I see by show of hands if any jurors have questions for this witness? Seeing none at this time, Detective Long, if you are excused, thank you. My understanding is you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That's the state to call the next witness.
Jonathan Gutierrez.
Mr. Gutierrez. Ms. Weatherly, do you have any intention of using the Elmo during this questioning?
Not the Elmo, but I will be playing a video.
All right. And I believe it would be set up or this time.
I think we've coordinated.
Hopefully we're technological glitches today. Thank you.
Following further testimony, you're about to give this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God. Can you see it?
Mr. Gutierrez, the clerk has direction for you.
State and spell your name for the record. State and spell your name for the record.
Jonathan Gutierrez?
Mr. Gutierrez, can you spell your first and last name, please?
J-O-N-A-T-H-A-G-U-T-I-E-R-R-E.
Mr. Gutierrez, and I appreciate if you're nervous that may be the case, but we need you to speak up so that everybody in the courtroom can hear you. And there is a microphone in front of you, just to ensure that you are being able to be heard, and the court reporter in front of you needs to obviously be able to take their testimony. Okay? Thank you. Ms. Weber, whenever you're ready to proceed.
Sir, back in February of 2013, were you working in Las Vegas?
Yes.
What did you do at that time?
I was driving a cab.
What company did you work for, sir?
Lucky Cab.
Lucky Cab? And if you could speak up just a little bit, please, or maybe is that pulled as far? Perfect. Sir, I'd like to talk about the February 20th of 13 into the 21st. Were you working during that time period?
Yes, ma'am.
And what hours were you working?
2 a.m. to 2 p.m.?
2 a.m. to 2 p.m.?
Yes.
And do you remember what part of town you were working?
All over Vegas.
All over? Do you remember going to the Aria that night, I guess?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And were you going other places, or were you just staying in the area of the Aria?
I was going all around.
Okay. Do you remember obviously the incident that occurred on the 21st?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember the fare you picked up, or who you picked up generally right before that happened?
Yes.
Can you describe for us where you picked them up and what happened that evening? Or that, I guess it's early morning hours.
I think I picked them up at Aria.
Okay.
And dropped them off at Palms, I think.
Do you pick up a fare in the early morning hours at Aria?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
yes.
it?
Yes.
Okay. And when you left the Aria, what route did you take?
I went down Harmon to Vegas Boulevard.
And when you turned on to Las Vegas Boulevard, do you know what direction you were heading?
Yes, I was heading north, Vegas Boulevard, no?
Okay, toward Flamingo?
towards Flamingo.
And you had a fare, obviously, in the back of your cab?
Yes, they were going to Palms.
Do you remember who it was or who they were?
No.
Male or female?
2 males.
Okay. And they wanted to go to the Palms?
Yes.
So describe for us what happened as you left the ARIA.
What happened?
Yes.
I pulled to Maserati. I pulled to the light, and the Maserati was next to me.
Okay. Were you on the inside left turn lane?
Yes.
And the Maserati was to your right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have any interaction with the Maserati?
No.
What happened after the Maserati pulled, or you pulled up to the Maserati?
What happened?
Yes.
A Range Rover got in front of a cab and the Maserati.
And when you say the Range Rover got in front of the cab and the Maserati, you're talking about your cab, right?
Yes.
How did it get in front of you?
Sideways like this.
Was it blocking your turn?
Yes.
And did you see anything about who was inside the Range Rover?
Not really. No, not really.
Not at that time?
No.
When the Range Rover pulled in front of you and the Maserati, what happened after it did that?
I think a guy put the window down and started arguing with the guy with the Maserati.
Okay. The window that came down, was that in the Range Rover?
The Range Rover. Mm-hmm.
And you thought it was a guy arguing?
Yes, he was arguing with the people in the Maserati.
Could you hear what was being said?
No.
Could you see who was in the Maserati?
I only saw the hair. I didn't see.
What kind of hair did you see in the Maserati?
Like long hair.
Long hair? Could you tell if the people in the Maserati were male or female?
He was male, I think.
Okay. Could you
He
tell?
was a little bit more in front of the cab.
Could you tell what race they were?
African American.
Okay. How about the guy in the Range Rover?
African American.
Okay. Could you see anything about his hair or how he looked?
Can't recall.
Okay. When you pulled, well, you're at the stop waiting for the light, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And the Range Rover's, oh, thank you. And the Range Rover's sort of blocking the left turn lane. And you said you couldn't hear what was being said. Could you see the facial features at all of the person in the Range Rover?
Probably at that time, but I can't recall right now.
Can you describe, though, if it was a friendly conversation or how he was talking?
No, I can't recall.
Okay. Do you remember anything else about that first stop?
I just remember that he got in front and then put the window down and started arguing with the other guy, but I can't remember anything.
Okay. You remember it as arguing, though?
Kind of. Well, yeah, he got in front and started.
Yeah, so more aggressive?
Must have been.
Okay, so what happens as the light turns green?
They both, we all turned.
Okay, and then you're all on Las Vegas Boulevard?
Yes.
What happens as you proceed north on Las Vegas Boulevard?
We proceed and then all of a sudden I heard shots, let's say.
Okay, could you tell where the shots were coming from?
Range Rover?
And could you tell out of what?
I didn't see no gun or nothing, but I can tell you probably the Range Rover.
Okay, at the time you heard the shots, where was the Maserati in relation to the Range Rover?
Right next to it.
On which side?
On the right side of the Range Rover.
Okay, so where were the shots coming out of the Range Rover?
From the right side.
From the right side, the passenger side.
side.
And where were you?
Behind the Range Rover.
Okay. And sir, do you see on your screen, I'm going to play a video and then ask you some questions about it. And this is an edited version of the video we saw yesterday, and this is 208B for the record. Just stop that for a second. So, sir, that's you obviously in the front of the cab?
Yes, ma'am.
And in front of you, or the other view is out in front of you on Las Vegas Boulevard?
Yes.
Obviously, the Range Rover's right in front of you and the Maserati's to your right? Okay.
The video appears to be cycling back to the beginning.
Yeah, I'm just trying to fast forward it, Your Honor.
I don't know if it's a dude or a girl though.
have any reason to doubt that that's your interview?
No.
No? Okay.
Afterwards, and then after they were done with their work walking the scene, then I also walked the scene and looked for tire mark evidence, vehicle damage, and other roadway evidence.
And so it's at first kind of a briefing to find out what it is that you know from the various different sources. It's a rather large briefing, is it not?
Yes, it is. Several people are involved.
And this briefing, you said that your team, the fatal team, is a support function because the lead is done by homicide, and in particular Dan Long and Terry Miller.
In this case, yes.
And how many people constituted your team, the fatal Metro investigative team?
Our Sergeant Richard Strader, Detective Dave Freeman, Detective Salberry, and Detective Solomon.
And so you three are the components of doing the accident portion of the global homicide investigation.
Correct.
And after you make the walkthrough, the briefing, the visual examination, crime scene analysts are memorializing the scene in many different ways, photography being one.
Correct.
And what is your kind of role in your team about assessing where you begin to conduct your investigation and measurements from this particular scene?
The final rest point of the vehicles, identifying the final rest point of the vehicles, we work the collision backwards from the final rest to its origin, identifying roadway evidence and markings on the roadway that correlate to the vehicles as they travel through the collision process. Also assessing the vehicle damage to see which parts of which vehicles contacted each other. During this process, once we figure out which roadway markings belong to which vehicles or whether or not they belong to the accident at all, we mark that roadway evidence with small orange cones and colored spray paint. Then after we're complete doing that, in this case Detective Freeman used a survey device to get overall measurements of the scene and where the final rest points, places of the vehicles were, as well as our roadway evidence. We use two different devices to do this. They're both made by a company called Sokia. And basically what they do is plot this data, which I later download into a drawing program and create a scaled diagram of the collision scene.
And that's reflected in the ultimate work product that's generated from that process. I mean, our approach is State's Exhibit 207. Sure. State's Exhibit 207 that is in evidence. Let me just show you this. Is that what we're speaking of?
Yes.
I'll leave that with you. And in the photograph that's before the jury now, going back to State's Exhibit number 4, is that from the items that you can see in that photograph, this is after several of those markings and measurements have occurred because of the nature of what you see on the asphalt. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And could you explain what we're looking at in the different colored portions of the northbound travel lanes of Las Vegas Boulevard?
Well, the different colors Just above the area noted as AIC1, which stands for Area of Initial Contact Number 1. There's a short orange line with 2 cones. You can actually see the tire mark on each side of that orange line. That would be considered an over-deflection tire mark from a tire that's being depressed down in the roadway. The outside edges of the tire are pressing hard into the roadway and leaving that mark. These are the types of marks that we're looking for. And in this particular case, this was the first mark to be seen, and is depicting where the first impact was happening between the white Chevrolet truck, utility truck, and Maserati.
And that's actually the effect of downward forces on the tire from the collision, from the impact.
Correct.